Welcome, everyone. It is Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. Welcome to our 9 a.m. board briefing meeting. Let the record reflect that we have three commissioners that are present this morning. Commissioner Cooge, Commissioner Jordan, and Commissioner Cuney. I'm hearing that Commissioner French will be late, so you'll see him join when he arrives. And then Commissioner Waldrop is going to be not available this morning. So with that, we've got a busy schedule. And Commissioner French is just arriving, so there we go. With that, we have a busy schedule, so we are going to go ahead and get started. So Monty, I'm going to let you lead off here. Sorry, I should have had you come sit up to the table to start.
Sometimes you change the order, so we wanted to wait. I'll just, sorry, let people arrive. Good morning, Monty Chamberlain, Public Works, and what we're bringing forth will be on next Tuesday's agenda is a Liberty Lake TIF lift reimbursement request. And this one is for the Kramer Parkway overpass. So it's reimbursing for the city's portion of that bridge project. And Carol Dixon, the Liberty Lake Finance Manager, is here, and we're here to answer any questions you may have about the reimbursement.
Just excited that it's there, and
us as
well.
well.
Like everybody is very happy that it's
Yes,
happened to
absolutely.
open, and I think the high school is really appreciating that.
Yeah, fire department as well.
Yes.
Yeah, they're right there, so they can just shoot right over I-90 right there.
So is this kind of the final request for that, or?
Yeah, so this is the third project there was a partnership between Liberty Lake, the county, and DOT, the Connect Washington $26 million project. Harvard to the east, Barker to the west. This is the final piece, Kramer, that will essentially complete the initiative to connect Liberty Lake north and south.
And will there be any more reimbursement for the bridge project itself? Will there be any?
No, so the county will reimburse itself when the time comes through the TIF and LIFT program for their portion of this project.
But this is for this specific project, because then there's other projects within the lift and the.
Oh, correct. So just with this project, this will be the final one for this project.
Okay. That was what I was checking.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, totally.
Pretty routine, so
No.
thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, absolutely appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for coming for just a few
Absolutely,
minutes this morning.
absolutely.
Okay, that's gonna take us to Kyle.
Good morning. We are here to talk a little bit about, I've got County Engineer Matt Zaracore here with me today. We're talking about our ER&R rates. These we're adopting separately this year. I think in the past we've bundled them with our annual construction program, but because they fall under different statutes, we wanted to make sure that they were separate actions by the board. So this is setting our rates for next year for basically all the equipment that we manage.
I see this is incredibly tiny, so I apologize for that, but I'll just kind of talk about it in real general terms. We have a separate fund that houses the ER&R program. It's Fund 501. Inside of it, 95% of it is to support 110, the road fund. The other funds that we do support, though, are juvenile. They have, it looks like 18 vehicles in it. Prosecutors have one. Scraps, we support them. They have 13 of their vehicles in there. And then building and planning have 14. So predominantly a 110 road fund, ER&R, but also a few other groups are supported. They get monthly rates. Most of our other equipment is by the hour, and it gets billed out by employees to reimburse. And our recovery, we have fairly intricate program that looks at how we recover each category that you see up there. Everything's broken out. The main ones obviously are our graders, our Class 8 trucks, and then our light truck fleet. That's, the vast majority of that fund is those three things. And we look at them each year, make sure we're doing the recovery appropriately. We do get audited. We need to make sure we can pass audit on that and are handling the fund responsibly. Inside of 501, there's also materials, but this is just the rates that we go with each year. So we sit down as a group each year with Shannon Berkey, our finance person, Kyle, Andy Shank from our maintenance group, and look at that. It was as we've been upgrading the fleet, obviously those rates have had to increase to recover those costs. And we're trying to find that balance point with getting the fleet upgraded and reliable with being able to pay for it on the other side, because it's a big cost to 110. So we've been working through that. It's a slow process. We're working on the light truck fleet now. We had some that we fully utilized a lot of our light truck fleet. They were 30 years plus and 200, 250, 300,000 miles on vehicles. And we have a pretty robust mechanic staff. So we've been able to support that, but we would like to upgrade it and get them more onto the routine maintenance and not dealing with breakdowns and that sort of thing. So that's it, kind of at a high level. Happy to answer any questions or just give you 10 minutes back, whatever you'd like.
The vehicles, after you surplus them, are you still doing the auction, or are you just giving them off to a dealer, or how are we disposing those now?
They all go to auction.
Oh, good auction.
We auction them. The auction, as you know, equipment has become very valuable. So even our very old equipment, we've seen a lot better than you would expect on the salvage value of a lot of the equipment, which has been helpful. But the new costs have gone up quite a bit too. So it's been offsetting to a degree.
They're kind of always chasing because of the lag of when we're setting rates compared to what we paid for the vehicle compared to what we will pay for that vehicle 8-10 years down the road. So there's always a contribution from the purchasing fund. It's not a whole, you're not being made completely whole in 501, but just we're always trying to stay within a reasonable percentage of what that is for what that replacement vehicle is going to be. So the last couple of years, we've had to take some substantial jumps due to the cost of equipment. I'd say this year wasn't quite as huge of a leap as we've had to in the past.
Well, and fuel costs being so dynamic, when it goes from $3.50 to $5 a gallon in a year, we have to adjust mid-year on our rates, and then you are overcompensating when the fuel prices fall back. So that's a pretty big variable inside of our rates. A lot of this equipment, as you might imagine, uses a lot of diesel. And that's really the biggest thing. And the other variable we can play with is service life. How long are you going to keep a piece of equipment in service? So trying to balance those things. We don't want to keep them 30 years as we had in the past for graders and trucks, but by the same token, is 8 or 10 or 12 the right service life? And we have new software that we've integrated that will give us a much better picture of each individual piece of equipment. So it's going to be a little more surgical when we look at equipment. If we get one that's a lemon, it just requires a lot of maintenance. It has its whole life. Probably have a shorter service life than one that's been very reliable or has lower hours. Maybe one just doesn't get the usage another piece does. So we're looking at it with a lot more scrutiny and a lot closer.
So one of the questions, I guess there's not a comparison to know what you're just saying these are the rates. So how much have they gone up since the prior year?
From last year, I don't think they changed a lot. The year prior was our big jump. That the software that we use that, Monty is very involved in and had been in the past, it's a 7-year smoothing, basically. It looks back 7 years in each category to kind of smooth out those increases. So when you upgrade a portion of the fleet, you don't see that huge impact in 1 year. But it had gotten to the point where it was really hitting us. These rates were supposed to go up a lot. I mean, and we were seeing the direct impact to 110. I mean, the annual cost to 110 were going up millions of dollars just for the equipment. And so we've ratcheted that back, which essentially means we're relying on a little longer service life out of that equipment category in general. But it's just finding that balance. We do want newer equipment, we want reliable equipment, but we have to be able to balance it with everything else the program is doing and still do the good work out on the road.
And so these rates don't reflect any percentage increase overall. It's literally every piece of equipment we look at individually, or every class of equipment, every individual, but every class of equipment got its own level of scrutiny. Some of them actually came down a few bucks. The rest went up by nominal amounts.
And then so the leased equipment, is that also part of the ER&R fund? Is there only owned equipment?
It is, and it's more of a direct reimbursement. It's in that category, but the lease payments are fixed. The maintenance is included. So then it's the fuel and a few other things that we look at, the routine maintenance we might be taking care of. And it's a much simpler look, but it's mixed in with all the equipment we own too in the same category.
Any other questions? Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're just gonna be on time or ahead of time.
Oh, well, we made it all right in time,
You
didn't we?
made it just in time. Look at that. I could have maybe asked another question.
Is the alarm fees up first?
Yes,
Alarm fees?
false alarm response recovery fee.
So all this is years ago, the board passed a resolution, basically having a false alarm program, where if the deputy responds, it's a false alarm, the homeowner or the business is charged a fee, but the fee was never adopted. And so we met with Scott and we kind of mirrored the same fee schedule that the Valley has, and it's $65 per occurrence. So basically, we're just asking that the county adopt the fee schedule so we can start charging for false alarms for responses. I have some stats. I mean, it's I think that when these stats were taken for 2023, it must have been halfway through the year because it shows 664, but consistently there's about 1,100 to 1,200 false alarms a year. So it's it's significant. Now, there is a mitigation process. They can appeal if there was any kind of like criminal activity discovered after the deputy left. Those fees are waived generally. People on fixed incomes. When I was the assistant chief in the Valley, I was the mitigator. So people would call in and send a letter in saying, I got this charge. This happened. There was wind or whatever, and so the fee would be waived. It's a pretty simple process. So. Not everybody gets charged, if there's other circumstances. So generally, if there's like a large wind event overnight or whatever, we just waive all the fees the night before because there's a ton of alarm. So we don't hold people hostage for this money. It's basically it's not supposed to be punitive. What it is to encourage them to work with their alarm company to get their alarm set right so they don't go off all the time. So, sir.
So I know in the city, they've got so if an alarm goes off, and I know the situation in some of my commercial buildings, they call me first before they dispatch. So do we do that here at the county as well?
We encourage, that's for businesses especially, we encourage that's part of what this process is sometimes, so a homeowner will get an alarm or a business will get an alarm and they don't work through any of this stuff and we show up and it's false because it's set wrong. So we encourage them to work with their alarm company, to have them be the first call so they can make sure that it's an actual police event. So that's all this is.
I get this a lot. From my husband's company. It's like, there's a lot of those calls.
And schools are exempt. We don't charge schools. There's a lot of, there's some other exemptions too, but I can't remember there.
And what does ours compare to the city's fee?
I don't know what the city of Spokane's fee is. The Spokane Valley's fee is 65.
I think the city is 90.
I think it's pretty expensive because I know we try to make sure it's really needs,
what I
somebody
remember
needs to be
saying.
involved.
It encourages businesses and homeowners to make sure that they're responsible with their alarms, that we're not their security company, basically.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Any other?
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a lot of false alarms.
Yeah.
So we're here to present an opportunity that Flock presented 3 weeks ago in order to extend a contract with them and save us a significant amount of money over a 5-year contract. We're currently on a 24-month contract that would expire next year. They raised their prices 20% after we signed that contract. So this opportunity, which we have till the end of this month, but they kind of gave us late notice, so we're negotiating that deadline and give us an opportunity to bring this before you. Essentially, we would at least go up 20% in 2025, plus any additional costs that they could raise with their business model. This would put us out 5 years at the current rate and save us probably along with the operating system. So the operating system is the dashboard software that gives access to all our officers to live video from third parties, from businesses, from license plate readers, and situational awareness for all the officers within our agency and the Valley. So we currently pay $35,000 a year plus tax. If we were to come on board right now, or if our contract was to expire, it would probably cost us in excess of $70,000 a year. And that also could end up going up as we expand our cameras. There's a 200 camera level ingested in the system, and then 500. We anticipate getting to the 500 level in a couple of years by the time this contract expires. So the current math, I just got this contract today to send through legal, would save us about at least $245,000 over the 5-year period. The one kicker was we have grant funds till the end of 26 under ARPA, and obviously this extends past that. So they first denied it. We were able to, with our great relationship with them and the successes we've had here, we were able to negotiate and get them to include a non-appropriation clause into that contract, so that if, in the event we didn't get the appropriation of those funds at the end of the contract, or the grant, then we would not be held liable for those additional years. So, but if we had that appropriation, we would stay with Florida.
So you were able to get that in the contract?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Commissioner French.
So that's, mine's easy. Remind me what FLOC stands for.
Well, it's not an acronym.
It's not?
It's not.
Okay, well, I'm trying to.
Which is surprising, right?
I'm putting the words to the letter.
Yeah, Flock's a private company that actually started in kind of private gated communities, and then now has become one of the largest automatic license plate reader companies in public safety. So Flock is just the name of their company. And they also branched out to the situational awareness platform. And the other situational awareness platform that we were looking at to meet our needs, which you all get our consultant report here probably in a few months that we paid a significant amount for. And they said we must have a situational awareness platform. The other vendor was $125,000 per year. So the $38,000 for the elite level for 5 years is an opportunity I don't think we should miss.
This is what happens when you allow alcohol at a business meeting. I guess come up with FLOC.
All their cameras are named after birds, believe it or not.
There you go.
And these are the ones that are on the, sorry.
Oh, good, go ahead, Madam Chair, please.
These are the ones that sit on the street signal lights and stuff. Is that where
They
they're at?
can. The Flock ones are currently standalone on poles with solar. The ones that we have currently, like out in Airway Heights on the light poles, are a company called Neology, which we're moving away from, based on cost and maintenance.
Is it Liberty Lake, City of Liberty Lake? They're
They have
using
all Flock.
Flock.
Airway Heights has all Flock. Liberty Lake's increasing their cameras. We currently have 48. So anybody that thinks we have like 10,000 cameras out watching people, we don't. We have 48 total in all of the unincorporated, and we're hoping that the Valley will move forward on an agreement for at least 40 cameras within the next 6 months, I'm hoping. And they all work together.
Got my question answered.
And how much, what is it costing, what is the annual amount of the contract?
Just the cameras was, currently was just over $100,000. With the operating system and the additional cameras that just got installed, I've got to comb through this, but it's about $150,000, $180,000 a year. But I'll have some more concrete numbers for you when we can comb through this.
Okay. And then with the real-time crime center, we can access those other Flock cameras.
Yes.
If we have agreements with like the City of Liberty Lake.
And additionally, we have the ability to identify if there's cameras in other jurisdictions in the US. They're all across the US. So we can reach out to them and see if there's any of our crime evidence in those other jurisdictions. So there's an evidence.
Ashley?
The other thing that we can do with Flock that we've been working on with the sheriff's office is we can integrate our AIMS camera system that we have that's on our current parking vehicles. And so we can also help provide data to the sheriff's office through our rolling vehicles. So that is one of the very few programs that AIMS will directly partner with and work with. So it would be a benefit to one of the programs we already do have here at the county.
Yeah, Ashley's team was generous enough to work with us on that. We noticed that we've got county vehicles driving around with license plate readers on them. We're like, well, we get threats against public officials, for those that are aware. We get other type of reasons that, yeah.
Yeah. We had to hide ours.
And sometimes it gives us the ability to even mentally just put a vehicle description in, not even a plate. And we can get an alert, give us some time to see, do we have a potential threat in the area? Is somebody showing up to court who that we have a warrant for that is bringing somebody else here? There's a bunch of different ways that can help us. Plus, it integrates with Axon, which is a big leverage for us as well.
Yeah, that's great. Any other questions?
Resolution.
And since this is there's an existing 2-year contract, correct?
Correct.
That you guys have already approved through resolution. This would be a 5-year contract, so I believe, and with new language, it would be a different contract. So that new language needs to go to legal, and I think you need a new resolution to approve the 5-year contract. I would guess, correct?
I would think so. Is the new contract that you guys just got the one that's uploaded here today, or is it a different?
I don't know, did Katie upload it?
I'm not sure, it's just in the agenda packet.
I know he has a red line version that he
Okay.
sent to
Okay.
legal, so,
Yeah,
and I think
that
you can do
sounds-
that
Yeah,
immediately, correct?
Yes, I just opened this
As
morning.
long as the board is
Okay.
comfortable with moving forward, because he'd like to get it, he'd like to get it on the agenda for next week.
For next week? I think,
We'll see what we can do as soon as we get it.
so who's legal for?
Tim Knoll.
They created the very short timeline for us by not telling us about this in the summertime, so we're negotiating, working with them to extend the offer if we, for some reason, can't get it in next week.
Tim is on.
Yeah.
Tim, I see you're on. Do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, can you repeat the question for me? I was actually working on something else on the sideline here for a second.
We're talking about the Flock contract, Tim. It sounds like Flock just sent the sheriff's office a new one that'll be heading over your way here very shortly. And so looking at that for attempting next week, but Flock's put us on a short notice.
Yeah, so I can certainly make it a top priority and get it done as quick as I can. I haven't seen it, so I don't know exactly, what it entails, but I can make it a #1 priority and try to get that done.
Tim, this is Kevin Ritchie. From what I understand, basically it's an extension. Instead of a 2-year contract, it's a 5-year, and then there's some new language for non-appropriation. And other than that, there's not a lot of changes.
Yeah, and that's fine. I don't believe I saw the original one. That may have predated my time here, so it'll kind of be all new to me, but I understand that probably will help move the process along, hopefully.
Okay, awesome. Well, that would be helpful if we can get it approved. Just since next week is our last meeting for 2 to 3 weeks, so appreciate it.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you.
Morning,
Great.
ma'am.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing well. Gentlemen,
Good. Everything's gonna be timely today ahead of time. This is gonna be awesome. We're just gonna keep everybody moving though.
So I'm Pablo Perfil. I'm with the Housing and Community Development Department. I'm currently in charge of the Affordable Housing Program. And I came to here today to respectfully request delegation of a certifying official. So next slide, please. So basically, a certifying official or certifying officer, these are both interchangeable for HUD, but they're responsible for overseeing environmental reviews. They sign for requests for release of funds, and they represent the responsible entity, which is Spokane County. Next slide, please. And here's just a simplified project timeline. I'm sure you're somewhat familiar, ma'am, but basically whenever our affordable housing projects are shown before the HCDAC and they make their recommendations, we come to you for approval. And once that approval is there, you basically approve the funding and everything on that end. And then we are able to start our environmental review process. After the environmental review is complete, we have to draft a request for release of funds. And since you already approved the funding for the project, a certifying officer needs to sign the request for release of funds. And then basically our project is funded. So there's kind of like a gap between when you approve a project and when we could actually receive funding. So next slide, please. So basically a reason for our delegation is, first of all, HUD allows this. As you, ma'am, being the official, certifying official, you are allowed to delegate a position or positions or certain individuals just to sign the request for release of funds. This would be very helpful for us as a department because I'm requesting for Mr. George Dahl to be able to approve and for our CEO because they will inherently be a little bit more involved with the actual environmental review. So they'll be somewhat up to date on every single thing that's happening. So for them to be able to sign a request for release of funds will help us actually get funding out to a project, especially if it's a project that's been waiting for quite a while for funding. So this basically cuts potential up to a month, maybe even more, for us to just get those signed since you already approve a project and its funding. And that's basically about it, ma'am. I have a couple handouts, but I believe they're attached. If you'd like to see a sample HUD delegation letter, but that's about it.
And then is it just me delegating or is it the board authorizing?
I believe for HUD, they have you specifically as the signer, but for Spokane County, I'm assuming if everybody agrees, it'd be a board delegation.
Yeah, board delegation under your leadership as chair of the BOCC.
Very good. So then this will be on next week's agenda to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And really kind of the reasoning behind this, in addition to what Paul has already stated, oftentimes we put before, like these environmental reviews have a whole bunch of documents, background information, everything. And I don't believe it's necessarily fair to put that in front of the chair and say, please sign that all of this is accurate and true. So it's a way of just making sure that folks that are kind of on the ground doing all of that have that ability.
And we've already been doing this as well, haven't we? Because I haven't seen any of these come through.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it was done in the past, but we're making sure that we're formalizing it here through this process. So doing some cleanup.
And ma'am, for previous requests for release of funds, I have seen that you have signed them in the past, but the earliest I've seen was 2022, I believe.
Okay.
But we haven't had anything that's actually needed a signature yet until right now, where we realized we should probably delegate a certifying official.
Okay. So that was going to be my next question. Or it hasn't happened that frequently that I haven't noticed. So, okay. I think
Nothing
it's
super exciting.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I think it's just determine if, when we delegate our authority like that for different things, it's just, is there, at least an awareness that that's come through. So I'm just, so as the chair, whoever the chair is aware. Just if it doesn't happen that frequently, it might be a nice just request.
Yeah, and maybe one thing that we could do when we when we go through a request for proposal process, we can identify those that have an appropriate environmental review attached to it and the level of review, so that you're approving the allocation of funds, but also where this environmental review process comes in, just so that there's kind of a bookmark on where this applies and where it does not.
That'd be great.
I was gonna say, I mean, before it even gets to the situation where the certifying officer would sign off, I mean, we will have already approved the recommendations from the HCDA. So I mean, that's sort of.
Yeah, so I think if they just mentioned the environmental review is part of it during that point, then
And then in the event that, say, there was some significant environmental finding, that comes up as a result of it, we absolutely would bring that before you all just to keep you up to speed on what's going on.
Because is the environmental review happening after? Well, because we're kind of approving
Ahead of time.
ahead of time, so yeah.
And we also do a cursory review, because you can tell, I mean, in Spokane, we don't have a lot, like over in the Seattle area or on the west side, you've got a lot of salmon bearing streams and other sorts of things that get into a lot of floodplains, et cetera. There's not as much of that here in Spokane, so there aren't the same restrictions that we deal with. So it's very uncommon. The biggest thing would be if there's a significant archaeological property or something along those lines. But otherwise, most of it's a procedural process that we go through.
If it doesn't happen very often, maybe whenever that signature is done, there could just be an email to the chair for awareness. Just an idea.
And that honestly can be with our updates to the board with all of our projects as well. We could do the actual request for release and then also the updates of things that we have done, like with our Cape for our annual performance report. We could also put in all of that information more in detail as well.
Yeah, I also want to call out Pavel is a SkillBridge intern with us through the Navy. And just super happy to have him here, and an example of some of the great work that the SkillBridge program is able to bring as an asset to Spokane County. So we're grateful for Pavel and the program itself.
Well, thank you, because that's a super important project. So, I mean, working with veterans and people that are leaving military service, it's so helpful, you know, I'm sure you know yourself, but just having that ability to get experience out in the workforce, you know, to make that transition is so huge. So thank you, George, for, you know, because it's department heads that have to be willing to do it, as well as Ashley knows it's not just the commissioner saying we really want people to do this. It's department heads and everybody else working together to do that. So, and thank you for coming to Spokane.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay, so we don't have Doug Chase yet, but we're way ahead.
He is signing good judgment.
I saw Jim Amacio out there. There you are.
Hi, Madam Chair.
Should we just move ahead to you and we will come back to Doug Chase?
Doug's right here as well.
Oh, Doug's there.
Doug's
Okay.
here.
You never know when you might be ready
yeah.
early for us.
Come on in.
Okay, we're all set. Okay, perfect. We just. Right, perfect. Jim, I may stay in this.
No, not a problem. We're family.
Right. Well, good morning, Commissioners. With me, I have Rachel Hansen and Hayden Harlan, a Recreation Program Manager and Recreation Coordinator. They've had probably, I want to say, our most successful season on record with regard to attendance at our aquatic facilities this last summer. Continued great season at the campground out at Liberty Lake, and they have put together a nice brief overview of this season, the 2023 season. So with that, I will turn it over to Rachel.
Okay, well, thank you. Yes, so Rachel and Hayden, we're gonna get our presentation started. If you could, oh, we're on the right page, it looks like. So, so this summer we had another amazing aquatic season full of public swim offerings, which included our swim lessons, swim team, public swim. Our rates for all the programming and public swim sessions are listed on the slide on the left-hand side. That's this year's fees. And this year there weren't any minor fee increases for swim lessons or swim team. However, swim team or public swim did not increase, sorry. Next.
I'm just gonna clarify, that was during this
season,
year
yes.
versus next season.
Yes.
Yeah, and that briefing last week.
The fee schedule,
Okay.
yep.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start off by taking a deep dive into our north side aquatic facility. Next slide, please. A look at our public swim attendance shows that our average daily visitors were nearly identical to last year. The red line shows the temperature for each day this season, and it comes at no surprise that attendance is lower on colder days. A total of 3 days of operations were impacted this season, 1 due to a fecal contamination and 2 days due to poor air quality, which unfortunately fell on the last 2 days of our season. Next slide, please.
We were delighted by our attendance trends this summer. Public swim attendance remained strong. Swim lesson participation was strong with the highest number of students we've ever had and slightly above last year's numbers. Swim team numbers were identical to last year. Next season, we hope to adjust our swim team offerings to allow for more participants to meet the community demand while working within our time and capacity constraints. All told, our total patrons served this summer was just over 44,000 guests, which broke last year's previous record. Next slide.
Here you can see that Northside generated the highest revenues to date. This was because we greatly exceeded revenue projections for both public swimming and programming. Expenses also continue to rise in operating this facility. Expense increases this year can be attributed to a steady increase in minimum wage as well as inflation. Similarly, operational expenses such as utilities, chemicals, and mechanical expenses to operate our new features can be attributed to these expense increases. Next slide, please.
This shows the trends for our main revenue streams. Public swim revenues were incredibly strong and can be attributed to the continued offering of 2 3-hour public swim sessions. This allows us to have more people flow through the facility each day than ever before. Program revenue increased due to the $5 swim lesson fee increase from 2022 and continuous demand for swimming lessons. Concessions revenue was slightly less than projected this year, and speaking with the Indians, they saw a drastic increase in their inventory costs, leading to less margin in most concession items sold. Next slide.
This slide breaks down the operational expenses into 3 main categories, those being full-time employee cost, seasonal extra help cost, and M&O supplies. The M&O expenses are broken down further on the left, where you can see the bulk of our operational expenses. Northside is projected to have an expense deficit of $10,700. However, you will see near the end of this presentation that we will recover those losses.
Next slide. Our cost per patron at this site has held relatively strong over the last several years. However, this year it saw a slight decrease from 2022. Our revenue per patron has held strong the last few years, leading to a 50% cost recovery at Northside this season. Next slide.
All right, and if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and shift gears and talk about Southside for a few minutes.
Any questions on the north side?
50%'s the goal, right?
55 is our goal.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
The average daily attendance at Southside Public Swim saw a modest increase of 7% this season. As with the previous Northside slide, you can see that the trends of attendance follow the trend of the warmest days. Next slide.
Here we can see our attendance numbers compared with years past. Public swim continues to be the main driver of visitors and revenue at Southside, and swim lesson participation was slightly above 2022 numbers, again breaking the record from last season. Next slide, please.
This slide shows how the expenses and revenues at Southside compared to previous years. Rising staffing costs and additional expenses in many categories is the leading culprit for the increase. Revenues in green are slightly down this year, which could be attributed to having fewer operating days this season. We had 62 instead of 64 days, along with 3 additional closure days due to air quality and contaminations. Next slide.
Here's a closer look at our 3 main revenue streams. Program revenue in green was very strong this summer due to the popularity of our Red Cross Learn to Swim program, along with support from our swim lesson scholarship donations. Concession revenues was great, with all of the 4,700 being gross revenue, and public swim revenues greatly exceeding our projections for all of the reasons previously mentioned. Next slide, please.
A deeper dive into expenses shows the three main categories. On the left, you can see in detail the types of expenses incurred in the M&O of this facility. Like Northside, utilities, chemicals, banking, and web services make up most of our operational expenses. We project that we will end the year with a surplus thanks largely to excess revenue from public swim attendance. Next slide.
Similar to Northside, our cost per patron has held relatively steady over the last several years. However, this year it saw a slight increase from 2022. This, along with our gross revenue per patron remaining strong, brought us to about a 50% cost recovery this season. Next slide, please.
As always, we want to give a huge thank you to the Spokane Parks Foundation Make a Splash program, which supported us this season, $4,000 for swim lesson scholarships, $6,000 for a total of 6 free Saturday night community swim events that were on select Saturdays this season. We also received a generous donation of $3,300 from the Airway Heights Correction Center to use towards swim lesson scholarships. Combined, both swim lesson donations covered the swim program fee for 135 children in our community, greatly helping us meet our mission of educating as many children as we can about water safety while improving and refining swimming skills. Next slide.
A quick peek at attendance comparisons year over year shows an increase in average daily attendance at both sites. To reiterate, the large jump, especially seen at Northside in 2021, is due to the facility renovations that both facilities received, along with shifting our operational model to 2 3-hour public swim sessions, which began during the 2021 season. Next slide, please.
Since 2013, the minimum wage in Washington State has risen 71%. We continue to employ creative strategies to keeping costs down while still offering the same quality, reasonably priced programming to the public. Next slide.
This is the total number of patrons served and the total cost, as well as revenues per patron, rolled up from both sites together. We are thrilled to have served nearly 89,000 people, which is the most on record. Interestingly enough, both sites landed at a cost recovery at 50%. It's important to remember that this is still a very solid cost recovery number for a water recreation facility. Many of our aquatic partners in the region don't even track cost recovery because it's extremely low. Those who do track have shared that it's at an average about 30%. It's a balancing act, but we aim to have the best cost recovery as possible each season, despite many factors working against us, such as minimum wage and M&O increasing. Next slide, please.
Here's where we project our revenue and expense budgets to land at year end. While Northside slightly exceeded budgeted expenses, that deficit will be offset by our revenue surplus at this site. Southside is projected to be under budget on the expense side and has a healthy surplus on the revenue side, leading to an overall extremely successful season financially. Next slide, please.
All right, I am happy to report that we met nearly all of our 2023 goals going into this season, which are listed here on the slide. We are still rethinking the hospitality worker position, but we'll have a solution before the 2024 season. We will also be adjusting the model of our swim team, which has historically been a summer-long programming lasting a total of 8 weeks, and instead we'll be offering 2 4-week sessions with the goal of attracting more participants and offering more flexibility. Next slide, please.
Goals for 2024, like Hayden mentioned, re-envisioning the hospitality worker duties. Increasing attendance numbers at the Saturday night free community swim events, partnering with the Spokane County Fire Department to build fun and educational lifeguarding in-service trainings, continually evaluating staff schedules to reduce staff when it's safe to do so, to avoid stress on employees, and to maintain a fun and responsible work environment that promotes continued staff retention. And then increase communications with our program participants wherever we can. Any questions? Okay, oh, next slide, sorry. There you go.
So, not really a question, but more kind of an observation. And please don't take any offense to this because it's not meant to be critical of you. But as we look at the program is achieving, do we want to contemplate moving it out of a subsidized program and into a self-sustaining program? And by that, what I mean is, instead of increasing the gate fare, you could increase the number of concessions that you offer inside the park, and other activities other than just because I understand that we don't want to eliminate kids being able to access the park, but we could increase our revenue through concessions and stuff. And so I just throw it out there for consideration and stuff. I know we are
about the new concession, or we're getting the new concession trailer too, right?
Up north, yes, the one that's there is will be greatly appreciated to have a modern, updated trailer. And we are, prior to contracting with the Spokane Indians, we would be in slight negative numbers at the end of the season for concessions. So we've really been pleased to turn it around. It's not a huge number, but it is a net profit now through that contract for the county versus where we were prior to contracting that out. One thing that Rachel and Hayden have identified that's part of the fees for next year is to rent out, to offer rental of the shade umbrellas. We'll make 50% available for rental. The other half will be first come, first serve. That I think is set at $65, if I'm remembering correctly. And that's a new offering and something we haven't done in the past. So we, along the lines of your thought, we're trying to find ways we can offer enhancements and an enhanced experience at the option to the customer. And we'll be really curious to start tracking that to see how well that is utilized in the season ahead. But that's, again, based on customer feedback. That's something that we're looking forward to experimenting with that should help offset some of those operating expenses and try to keep us, hopefully, reaching our goal for cost control.
I don't think it's ever going to be a self-sustaining endeavor. I mean, like Hayden was saying, most aren't even tracking their costs because and if they do track it, it's only a 30% recovery versus we're at least trying to get half the recovery.
Yeah, but I do know that parks like this can be very financially successful and stuff. I know that because my daughter is a CFO for one of the parks down in southern Idaho, and they operate at a much greater level than this is. And I'm not suggesting that we ever get to that level. I mean, she's Silverwood on steroids. We're not there. We'll never be there. But are there other opportunities for us to enhance revenues that either could maybe lower the gate fee? If we've got to make shift some of our revenues to other opportunities or not? I'm just raising the question because it's both parks do extremely well. When they're doing extremely well, that's the time you look at where are the growth opportunities. You don't want to look at growth opportunities when you're financially underwater. You look at how do you sustain yourself and grow. And so that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, it'd be worth a conversation with her on these numbers, just to see what her thoughts are as to what opportunities she might see.
Yeah, I mean, she's just a speaker at a national conference and stuff, so she's highly respected in the industry. She might be able to offer some insights. I don't know. Just throw it out.
Yeah, because there's this presentation and then one from last week that talks about our revenue increases that we're doing to see if she's got any thoughts.
Where you say you partner with the fire districts, which fire districts are you partnering with?
So this last season, we were in contact with the firehouse, maybe 9, I think. I just,
District.
District 8, District, yeah, yeah,
I think there's a fire station right across the street
from Southside
from
Aquatics.
the,
That's
Prairie
fire,
View
yeah,
Park.
fire 8.
So we were only able to do that with them this season, and then this next summer, I'd like to do one with the north side, whoever's closest to the Colbert pool. Yeah, we just called them up and have them show up and watch us demonstrate our skills, and we talk about that transition of when the lifeguards are providing care and then EMS arrives and takes over, how that transition can be smoothest and quickest and beneficial to both parties, so. Awesome. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Okay, yeah.
I just say thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're seeing people really enjoy both the facilities. So, it is kind of like, you don't have to go to Silverwood to enjoy,
Right.
really fun outdoor activity, water activity. True water park.
Lazy river, water slides, drop slide, yeah.
I like on your graph where even when the temperature is like 60, I mean, it's not a lot of people, but some people still show up.
They'll be there.
Yeah?
They'll be there.
hard.
The pool is heated at 82 degrees, yeah, they'll be there.
Raiders?
Yeah. We also have our Liberty Lake presentation to follow. Right. Yeah, if we're able to hop onto that PowerPoint.
And then I guess just to follow up on the Indians, because we just did that like 2 years ago, that we started
Spoken
concessions.
yeah, the.
2 or 3, 2021 was the first year we had running concessions.
And so, so I do remember
been
we
very
were
successful.
at a deficit.
yes.
And now we're
Yes.
getting.
Yes, we would be at a deficit, so it's not only helped the financial bottom line, but it really enabled Hayden and Rachel to focus on all other aspects of the operation, and that's been very helpful too.
And they have things dialed in, their concessions dialed in to have the least amount of employees to offer the most amount of concessions. And so versus we had, fry cooks and all kinds of stuff, employees that were needed to provide the different food options that we had. The concessions, they do a really good job of having one employee working while they're offering lots of choices.
Yeah, the menu's more limited, but again, they have a lot of experience with this, so they've been able to streamline it, and we benefit from that in a way that we were still continuing to experiment with different offerings, and I think that's probably the biggest observation is we offered a menu that was twice as large and was more demanding on staff time and storage space and all of that, and they've been able to come in and really streamline that and be somewhat profitable. And it's not a huge, certainly not a huge profit for them, but it's an opportunity really for a win-win partnership, and we've continued to enjoy that and see that as a good move for the operations.
So, what do you hear about Splashdown? Are they gonna open up this next summer or not?
I don't have any context there.
They're under new ownership, and so they were going to open last summer, and I don't know whether they ever did or
They
not.
did for a
Did
short,
they?
they did,
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
I know that.
Yeah, that's about the extent that I heard as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then the other question is, do we allow for the sale of beer and wine at the pool or not?
No.
You recall Commissioner French, one time Spokane County owned Splashdown.
Yeah.
Yes, we
And then we ultimately sold it, remember that?
Yeah,
Doug?
it was
And
the first
that was-
agreement I ever worked on.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah.
Then you graduated to racetracks.
Yeah.
Oh, that took a hard turn.
Oh, yikes. Oh, I'll take Splashdown.
I think we'll let you come on to your next
Okay.
presentation.
There it is, okay, perfect. Okay, so yeah, we'll switch gears and jump into the 2023 Liberty Lake Regional Park presentation. Next slide here.
All right, so we had another beautiful park season this year with great weather, bringing in lots of different visitors.
This year, our park season began on May 5th and ended on October 1st with camping available each night. The entrance booth was open daily and charged day use fees from Memorial Day to Labor Day and on weekends in May and in September. The entry fee price has remained the same for several years. Next slide, please.
We are thrilled to report another extremely successful season. Between a slight increase in camping fees and more attendance captured at the entry booth due to the increased staffing levels, we surpassed last year's revenue numbers. Our campground, beach, park, and hiking trails remain just as popular as they were following the pandemic. Next slide, please.
Here we've broken down the budget revenue versus actual revenue. As you'll see, our campground generated over $34,000 in surplus this year. Next slide.
On the expense side that you'll see, we managed to stay under budget for all line items, including full-time employees, M&O, and seasonal staff. We project to end the year with a budget surplus of nearly $21,000 from saved expenses. Next slide, please.
As you can see in this comparison between this year and last year, our revenue numbers are similar for each category. Next slide, please.
This slide compares the revenues and expenses from this summer to those in previous years. Thanks to this year's increase in staffing hours at the entry booth and the popularity of camping, our revenue continues to hold strong, with campground operations leading the way. Next slide, please.
Campground stays were slightly down from last year, yet the revenue remains similar to last year due to the slight increase in the 2023 camping fees. The average campsite increase was about $2 per night per site. Next slide, please.
And here's a closer look at the campground occupancy by month. Here we are comparing the total number of sites available with the total amount sold. As you can see here, July was our busiest month this summer. Next slide, please.
Let's look at cabin stays. We currently have 4 small rental cabins that are quite popular at the park, and we have plans in the works for a 5th cabin within the next year that will accommodate larger families. This year we had slightly fewer stays, yet revenue remained similar to last year due to that $2 a night fee increase. Next slide, please.
And here we can see the revenue generated by each type of accommodation in the park. While the green bar shows the total revenue generated by site of each type this summer, the blue bar, we also received a flip-flop here. Sorry about that. The blue bar shows the average revenue generated by each tent site, RV site, and cabin respectively. Next slide, please.
This slide shows the same revenues in comparison with previous years. Tent site revenues dipped in 2020 because half were closed to ensure social distancing, while other than that, our campsites continue to show gains year over year, and we predict that we will continue into the foreseeable future by continuing to maximize occupancy potential and through modest fee increases. Next slide, please.
The total visitation in the park was slightly up this year. This can be attributed to more entry booth staffing hours and very few poor air quality days, despite having 6 fewer days in our park season compared to last year. Please note that our total number of patrons served is only an estimate and is greatly impacted by what we can capture in our daily software transactions during our entry booth hours of operation. You'll see that our tracking of the cost per patron jumped significantly in 2019, when our department began tracking the expense of year-round park maintenance within the Liberty Lake budget. However, our gross revenue per patron continues to impress. The successful operation of our campground has kept net revenues per patron figures very strong despite expenses increasing. Next slide, please.
We were able to gather survey responses from campers this season through an email that they received on checkout day. As with previous years, we received many kudos for clean and well-kept park, friendly staff, and the creation of an experience that guests choose to come to again and again each year. Next slide, please.
As always, we selected a few constructive comments to call out, and the same themes emerged again this year as they always do, namely the sloped RV sites, noise enforcement concerns, and a strong desire to see the boardwalk over the marsh renovated. These are items identified for correction in the Site Master Plan Phase 1 and 2. We continue to work closely with the county park ranger to do what we can to enforce park rules and keep our public areas safe and enjoyable. Next slide, please.
Parkside Books is new this year, a joint venture between our department and the Spokane County Public Library District. This was a great idea to repurpose library books no longer in circulation, yet still just as valuable as ever. We essentially made a lending library in the blue building near the entrance of the park where guests can check out books and return to any library when they are finished. Next slide, please.
2023 goals were largely met this year. We had returning staff and a new hire with more availability, a full-time park coordinator, as well as an assistant who improved communication with staff and day-to-day duties. Parts of the Phase 1 master plan remain in the permitting phase, gearing up for construction. Next slide, please.
Our goals for next year mostly center around the implementation of Phase 1 of the master plan. We hope to minimize any interruptions to the park experience. We also plan to improve our tracking process for 0 to 5-year-old entries into the park to better capture park attendance. All right.
Are there any questions?
What controls or constrains the number of cabins, new cabins that you can build out at the Lake?
I'm smiling because we have about a year into permitting for a new cabin that we're working on right now. And we're optimistic that we'll get through all of the permitting and under construction. In fact, we've been approved for the remaining funding we need to construct that in next year. So I think it's just phasing. We have identified some additional cabins within the master plan. I would just have to look at which phase they're called for. But we have been working on, we're actively working on one now. We'll be very excited to finish that next calendar year. But I think those working on the permitting would tell you they felt like they're building a 3-acre commercial industrial structure based on the level of studies that are being required for stormwater for a 500 square foot roof and so on and so on.
Required by who? The county?
We're within the Liberty Lake Sewer and Water District watershed. And so they have a different set of regulations for stormwater. And so that are much more, anyhow, so we are working with them and we are very, very confident that we are going to have that covered forwards and backwards. We could be a role model by the time we'll be done with the project, and we'll be excited come this time next year to be sharing some of the photos, hopefully, of a completed new structure.
How many new cabins could you build if you didn't have to worry about funding or the permitting process?
I'm honestly gonna have to get back to you because we have an identified number within the master plan, and I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay.
So be happy to look that up and report back on what we've identified within the plan and the new design and level roads and level sites.
And the cabins, when they're built, you bid them out and somebody comes in and builds them for you, or?
We have constructed them in-house at this point. At one point, we looked at a tiny home approach, and it ultimately, the constructor wasn't able to, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so we've since shifted to the construction model, and it's something that our staff have been able to do in the off-season. And they really find it very, very rewarding. And it provides a really good variety to the operations team that are very, very talented.
And there's where I ultimately wanted to end up. And I was just thinking about our AGC program with inmates and the training and education. This would be a great hands-on experience.
I was thinking the Frame Your Future program too, that works with the high school kids.
Yeah.
Because they've been building sheds this isn't a huge jump from
No.
a shed to a cabin,
No.
essentially, but yeah, that was one of the questions I always have. Do you build them on site or are they prefab? And they just, someone brings them and drops them, so they are built on site.
Yes,
They
yeah,
are, okay.
through design, construction documents, and a lot of permitting.
Okay. I would certainly say reach out to both those organizations for, I mean, the frame of your future with the, you know, the high school kids aren't gonna build them, you know, from ground up, but if there's a portion of that construction that they could assist with to get some of that experience, I mean, we funded them through ARP as well, I mean, could help offset some of those costs too with some of those ARP dollars and teaching these high school kids some of these skills as well. I mean, I think that'd be a great way to collaborate with that, Bruce, especially since we're funding a lot of it, so.
We'll take a look at the master plan, and I just can't recall whether that's phase 3, 4, where we're at in the mix as.
And bring your futures to the Spokane Home Builders.
Yeah. Yeah, and they partner with the different school districts. And for that, at the high schools.
I just want to say I really appreciate all the data, historical context. You guys really gave a great presentation. Great pictures make me yearn for summer. So thank you.
We all are right now. Oh, for sure. Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time, appreciate it.
Yes,
Happy
thank you.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
You guys are doing great, so
Yeah.
thank you.
We have a fun job.
More fun than mine. We'll need to get you out to the pools.
Give you a break.
Exactly.
Thank
Mr.
you, Madam
Michu,
Chair.
Look at you, just all ready to go.
Well, yeah, well,
So patient.
you know what, this Workforce Investment Act has always been kind of a complex situation, and so I have two items which I'd like to brief you on. They're both very similar, and they both deal with amending interlocal agreements between the city of Spokane and Spokane County dealing with the Workforce Investment Act. As the board knows, in 1998, the federal government adopted the Workforce Investment Act. And it was an act that would provide resources to the states and the local entities to train individuals so they would be better able to get into the workforce. In 2013, Spokane County and the city of Spokane implemented the Workforce Investment Act. At that point in time, we prepared two contracts. The first contract I call the consortium contract. The second contract I call the council contract. Under the federal law, under the Workforce Investment Act, when there is a jurisdiction that has two large entities, they're required to form a consortium to identify who's going to be responsible for administering the Workforce Investment Act. So in 2013, the city of Spokane and Spokane County formed a consortium. And under the consortium, there were three people who operated the consortium: the mayor of the city of Spokane, a board of county commissioners, and another individual appointed by the board of county commissioners. Because the consortium wanted to obtain funds other than federal funds, it was determined that we would set up a council. And so by interlocal agreement, the city of Spokane not only set up the consortium, but we set up a council. And the council is a nonprofit corporation. And the council consists of some 25 elected representatives, one of which is from the county, an elected official, and one from the city of Spokane. And the council, being a nonprofit corporation, administers all the funds that flow from the state to the consortium and then to the council. Under the interlocal agreement that we have with the city of Spokane to set up the council, we employ an executive director who's Mark Metke, as we all know.
from time to time, the federal government audits, if you will, the Workforce Investment Act. So in 2021, the federal government audited the county's implementation of the Workforce Investment Act. And they came back to Mr. Metke in a written document, and they said to Mr. Metke, we recommend that you update your consortium agreement and your council agreement to address 4 items. And so what I have in front of you for your consideration next week is amending the consortium agreement with the City of Spokane and the council agreement with the City of Spokane to address these 4 items. I have worked with Mr. Metke. He's in agreement with the way we've redrafted the documents. I've worked with the City of Spokane Legal Counsel. They're in agreement too. So the consortium agreement and the council agreement will be amended in the following 4 particulars. Number 1, when we adopted the resolutions in 2013 creating the consortium and council, we referenced the Workforce Investment Act. That act was reconstituted right after we adopted these agreements, and now it's called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So we have to amend both documents to reference a set of WIA, WIOA. So that's the first change. It's real simple.
Otherwise known as the Attorney's Full Employment Act.
You got that right, Commissioner French. The second issue, which was an interesting one, is when they did the audit, the present consortium agreement and the present council agreement provides that the consortium, consisting of the mayor, representative of the Board of County Commission, a third party, they approve the recommendation of the council as to the hiring of the executive director. Unfortunately, the federal CFRs don't allow that. The federal CFRs say that the council is entirely responsible for employment and termination of the executive director of the council. So the second change we made in both documents is to recognize that change implemented by the CFRs, the federal regulation. The third change that we've made in the documents is to, as to identify that the council previously had to come up with a 5-year plan to address their responsibilities. Now that's been changed to 4. So we had to make that change. And again, that was a CFR change. The final change that we had to make is kind of a unique one. There was a question as to whether there was a conflict with the consortium, the 3 members, delegating to the council, the 25 members, the administration of the federal funds. And so the city attorney's office and the civil division of the prosecuting attorney's office, we felt that there is no conflict because there are 25 members on the board of directors of the council. And because of that, if there's any conflict, it would be de minimis and it wouldn't run afoul of any federal regulations. So the reason I'm here today is to say, you know what? I think we're in a good position to address the audit that was completed last year in 2023 and amend the consortium agreement and the council agreement to reflect the 4 things that I've talked to you about. Does the board have any questions? It really is complex. I think Commissioner Kearns, are you the county's representative?
Yep, he's the man.
Yep.
And it is a complicated arrangement that we've set up. It is, and I think
It's essentially just bringing us into
compliance.
compliance. I
Exactly
mean,
right.
it's not driven by the workforce council. It's
Exactly.
essentially just getting it so.
it's the audit.
There's nothing we can really do about it, so it's.
And so next week on your agenda, board members, I'll have on your consent agenda executing these restated contracts with these 4 changes that I've alluded to embedded in those contracts. And again, the city's on board and Mr. Metke is on board, and he's glad to have this taken care of, and so on and so forth. Any further questions? Okay,
Does that take care of both these items?
that does, Commissioner CUNY. I think we're ready for Rose Noble. I know that she was called to update the board on the TPA Commission's recommendations with regard to funding for 2024.
Yes.
Wanna knock off the Skrills agenda? That's usually needs to
No, yeah. Sure. I got any of the miscellaneous stuff? Pat, we just lost Pat. I'm not sure which page the agenda's on.
I'm looking for, it's not near the end. Where I thought it would be.
It's from, see if it's one. Oh, there we go.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's see, we're just seeing if we can find the agenda for the Shrills, I say
I don't think it's in here.
It's the same one I had it on page 203
203.
of the packet I have up right now.
There it is.
Okay. Why I don't have the page. Since it's a regional meeting, commissioners are all invited, other electeds are invited, we just have to approve it. This Friday, 2:30 on Zoom or in this conference room. I will be here in the conference room. Does anyone have any questions or comments with it? Everybody's okay approving it? We'll consider it approved. I'm not sure if it's actually on the, might be on the 2 o'clock today. I can't remember. I think it is. Look. Otherwise, I will check that. Go ahead, Pat. We'll just do
Okay.
miscellaneous.
Good morning, commissioners, Chair CUNY, members of the board. Pat Bell, your communications director. So today I'm here to talk about two things, the proclamation process, just to do a refresh on that, and then the process for sending out board directed press releases. So I'll go over both of those in just a moment. But before I do, I wanted to give some kudos to your communications team. As you probably know, we're a 3-part team. So myself, communications director, our digital content manager, Jessica Hines, and our Public Works Information Outreach Manager, Martha Liu. You can go with her. So thanks to them. It's been a great arrival here at the county. This is my second time, I think, in front of the board. So briefly, I'll go over some of our recent accomplishments and then dive right in. Obviously, the wildfire response. There was a lot of, some of this came into play, not with proclamation so much, but with a lot of the press work. So appreciate all the press conferences, the dignitary visits, the information and resources we were pumping out. Seems like a while ago. It's now been 3 months. The Measure 1 educational effort took a considerable amount of time and bandwidth this fall, but I think was a worthwhile effort, getting out to more than 25 community meetings and with the website and some videos and some handouts and a mail piece. The fair ribbon cutting, the state of the county, some excellent events executed by Martha Liu with your offices, the small arms range ribbon cutting, the winter operations press conference with some great visuals. We had an excellent Veterans Day event in front of the courthouse, the Operation Greenlight, the video that we did, I think one of the first that we've done spotlighting veterans that work here and what a great employer Spokane County is for veterans. And then the display case, which I hope you've all seen before we start taking that down, getting the next display up in the Public Works building. Seen a lot of people stop there and see, who county staff are who are veterans and recognize them, and great feedback on that. So all thanks to the communication department's efforts. Recently, the Euclid Bridge ribbon cutting, which was a success, and the West Plains, the north-south corridor groundbreaking and ribbon cutting, your KSPS spotlights, a number of interesting, challenging issues we've faced and helped communicate from the board perspective. So now to the proclamations. I did want to just go
some quick background. So what is a proclamation? You should have in your board packet that it's an official declaration or statement made by the board to recognize, honor, or commemorate a particular event, achievement, individual, or group within the county. As you know, these proclamations can be used to raise awareness about important issues, to celebrate some of our local heroes, mark special occasions. We have 2 sports teams coming up soon, and so those will be good opportunities to highlight some of those local success stories. The content, though, and purpose can really vary widely depending on what your interests are, what your priorities are, and what the board's priorities are. But typically, they will contain those factual whereas statements and then have a declarative statement at the end. We can recognize or someone's accomplishment and simply just stop there, or we can designate a day or a week, as you have in the past and have for many years. What does it take? The first step is that the majority needs to provide direction and some background information to our office, the communications office, to begin drafting a proclamation. Or if you have somebody in the community already, we can work with your team to start on the draft. It can be helpful to gather that background information, save some time there, especially if you'd like something to happen quickly. The best day really to bring them forward is on Tuesday, I believe. And we can turn them around as early as 1 week, the following week, but a lot of that depends on when the community group is able to come in and be present. And in the case of these schools, they're coordinating against academic calendars. But you may have other dignitaries or locals that you want and will need to work around their schedule. So the next step would be for the commissioner to bring us or their assistant to work with us to be the lead. It's helpful to have 1 or 2 just so we can coordinate with. There's some hands-on touch with outreach to the groups. In the case of the schools, to the principals, athletic directors, the students, etc. We like to pass everything by them for a quick fact check. We'll work with your office to contact the recipients, verify the content, as I said, and coordinate with them to be present. Another twist on this could be you passing a proclamation and taking it to the community and presenting it at an event, maybe a framed version. But in either case, we want to get a photo for their social media, for your social media, for your newsletters, etc. Something for the county website to really give this the weight that it deserves. Not just words, but some ceremonial photo is always a nice touch. And so if there's ever to be publicity around them, they're not always newsworthy, but sometimes they are, we will handle those as well. Another final touch would be, a signed photo or something from one of the commissioners to your group. Just take a nice touch. Any questions about proclamations?
Just ensuring before you spend a bunch of time on a proclamation that it needs to come before and have at least 3 commissioners give the head nod to move it forward. I think in the past we've just tried to keep it, like still special. We're not doing them all the time, that it's still something that makes it special and unique. So I guess I just want to, you were just saying, working with staff and stuff, I just want to make sure that it would come before us before you'd spend a bunch of time on it.
I appreciate that. I think that's very helpful feedback.
So, because then once it gets approved by the group to move forward with it, then that's where, a quicker turnaround probably for you, but I think important just to make sure before that goes forward that way. I guess I would just ask, has there been, knowing with 5 and things are changing, just having the policy, do we want it documented in writing? Do you have it in writing?
So I have a protocol guide for the office that we're developing with some protocols around a few of our common tasks, and this will be one of them. And it'll lay out the steps, but I'll make sure it's revised to note getting majority support and having it mentioned in a commissioner meeting. You could also mention it to us one-off, but I like that approach of, on the Tuesday or the Monday meeting.
Typically, I've always brought it up under miscellaneous, that's the place to bring it forward as a potential proclamation. So, Commissioner French.
So when I first got here, the policy, it was an unwritten policy, but a practice, if you will, then was that the only time we would deal with proclamations are proclamations that dealt with local activities. You know, whether it's recognition of success or an achievement or, you know, whatever. And we stayed away from state and federal issues. And that's kind of boded fairly well for us. And we've kind of stayed in that same lane, maybe unofficially, but by practice and stuff. And so I think that has done very well for us. I don't want to get into all of that other noise and stuff, but are we comfortable just continuing that as a practice, or do we want to reduce that to a policy? Or I'm asking the question just so that if somebody says, well, why haven't you taken a position on whatever it is? We've got a policy that we can say, well, it's not our policy, we don't do that.
I'd be happy to formalize it, you know, not, you hate to have absolutes, but that our focus of proclamations is to be on our local community.
Yeah.
Just because if you do a domestic violence week, someone could say, well, that's a federal, it's happening across the nation, but we also want to, you know, it also is important to our community. So you know, just to make sure that people aren't misinterpreting, but that we want the focus to be on our community. So
That's kind of where I'm at and stuff. And so I'm posing a question. I'm not canning any position. I don't know whether we need to reduce that down to writing or not, you know, and by practice, we've done very well by it, but, you know, we've never been challenged on it either.
I think if we have it in the guidance, that if we put it as the focus would be, then it.
Local.
Yeah. And it just reminds people.
Yeah.
That that's the focus. It doesn't mean it's absolute. I mean, there might be something that we do have to, but we still would all have to very much agree, and I think still keep, for the most part, the focus has to be on the because I don't love to get into national politics or any of that or issues. It's like, why not focus?
It's worked so well for everybody else around.
Yeah, hasn't it though? So.
I was just gonna say that being new, I've appreciated that the proclamations we've done have been all topics that everybody could agree to. I think that's a good practice to have too, even though, of course, the majority acts, right, officially. I think having it come for miscellaneous matters to see if everybody likes it is a good idea to continue.
Like 75% of them are just reoccurring every year though, too. So it's, which, you know, it's big for those organizations, you know, whether it's around a local event or, you know, sort of a specific date or week kind of thing. And then those organizations, I think, use those for, you know, as a part of their celebrations.
And if one of us wanted to make a statement on something that was beyond the scope of what we typically do, we could always put out our own statement, right, on behalf of our office. So
I would just add, I think Chris has a similar thought, but I would just add that these are really outreach opportunities.
Yeah.
And as much as we've made it about coming to the commission in other roles, both in the legislature, state agencies I've been at, and in the congressional office, they have something like this, like a congressional record, that's usually taken out and presented in the community at an event. And so it's kind of an in-reach, outreach opportunity. But that's why it's good to work with your office. You get the touch on the community group, on the organization, you know, to the extent that they use their own media to push out a newsletter to parents, a PTO group or something, to their booster clubs. That's all positive that the county is recognizing that.
What might be nice is to have the clerk's office put together kind of a list of over the past, I mean, just because with COVID, things got a little wonky there. So over like the last 5 years, the proclamations that we've done each year, just so I think it helps remind us what the recurring ones are, because there's some that I think we've missed that we'd like to do. So it might be good to have that list just to see, you know, especially for you, because I mean, the communications office can help prompt what some of those are. So I think that would be helpful for us to see and for you. And I I know the clerk's office can put that list together for the proclamations that have happened each year, each of the last, and I would say 5 years. Just because I think COVID, we were just dealing with the business at hand, we weren't
Well,
really doing a lot of proclamations at
The
that point in
ones
time.
that were centered around like an event, if those events didn't happen because of COVID,
Yeah.
they didn't, I would assume they wouldn't have reached out to us to get a proclamation because the event didn't occur, so. Yeah, it would be, I think it's a good idea, what you were saying, to see which ones are still around, or maybe ones that aren't relevant anymore because the organization or event doesn't happen.
So the other thing we've kind of avoided by practice is, a proclamation saying we support the Seahawks going to the Super Bowl, which then they never will and never did, and so then it's our fault.
Ouch.
And so just say, I won't live long enough. Anyway, but that's the other thing we've kind of by practice avoided is anticipatory proclamations. It's always been a celebration of your success, not rah, rah, go get them kind
I
of a
think Chris
deal.
and I could put a proclamation saying, go Mariners, go to the World Series.
I'm not sold on that now. Mary and I might need to get a third vote for that.
You wanna be the one that jinxes
You wanna jinx it, yeah, no,
At
yeah,
this
you're
point,
the Chicago White Sox,
There is
go
no
for it,
jinx.
you bet.
There is no jinx at this point.
it's so bad, you can't jinx it at this point.
Yeah, some things are beyond repair.
Yeah, with all the trades going on, unless there's some magic that's really gonna happen, yeah.
Anything to shake up the luck there.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
So,
anyway, that's just another observation.
yeah, no, and I think like the high school team is a prime example of, waiting till the success and, and making the state championship and doing it and, and like I think when we were talking about the other day, it's like, West Valley was second in state, but
Right.
it's like, it's really for, what a major accomplishment. So it's awesome that we get to recognize Meade and Mount Spokane, both of them, right?
Were you able to get a hold of somebody yet?
Yes,
That means
we did.
Yes.
Okay.
I will
Yes.
not be here, but that's okay. I'll be on the screen cheering everybody on, so. Yeah, so I think they'll both be here.
On the 12th,
You're not letting the Mariners thing go, are you?
Never. Not to the grave.
Like we could do, Gonzaga when they went to the finals.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't win, I mean, that was
That's
still
pretty
a huge
special.
accomplishment for our community, and for them, so. You're the one who proposed that one.
Yeah, well, I think, as I remember, it was celebration of the advancement they made. It wasn't an anticipation of, because I
No.
think you create unnecessary pressure, and they're already on a lot of pressure. I do like, though, the suggestion about doing more outreach with the proclamations and stuff, because it's sometimes inconvenient for folks to come down here, and we've had to try and figure out how to, and so I like the idea of going out in the community and giving those presentations and stuff. So if it's a community-wide thing, it would be obviously the chair, but I mean, if there's something unique in each one of our individual districts, I mean, it would be nice if the commissioner for that district could be the presenter kind of a deal. Just an idea, so we get presence.
Yeah. No, in the past, I've presented we've done the labor memorial.
Yeah, that's a good example.
In the end of April.
Yeah.
And so I've gone and read the proclamation.
Yeah.
But then it was like 1 year I was there and the city was reading their proclamation, we hadn't done a proclamation. I was like, how do we, I mean, which is why I think we need the list, because
Yeah.
there's just stuff that people think they're telling us and we're
Yeah.
not getting, and so then we don't know, it's like,
I've been in a number of those where they're like, here's a mayoral proclamation. It's like,
Could've,
it's
woulda,
like,
shoulda.
and they're like, and Commissioner Kearns is here too. And it's, don't have anything, sorry.
So I think those are the kind of things that we can
Yeah.
add, but again, having a list to say historically, this is what we've done, and see which ones we have missed or not, and then thinking about which ones we could add to.
You could imagine going and speaking to high school assembly, for instance, and
Yeah.
presenting it there.
Mhm.
Right. cetera, recognizing the team in front of their peers, something like that. Okay, second topic was on press conferences. Chris, did you have something else on that proclamation?
I was just gonna mention that, in looking at other jurisdictions
And Rosie is here, so after we do this, we'll come back.
on proclamations, one way that other jurisdictions have approached, the scope of the proclamations that they will give is by, simply saying that, we will only give proclamations to issues of, county or city importance, thereby not limiting yourself from issues that are also national, such as the Veterans Day proclamation that we just made and other
What I said,
other issues.
pretty much.
Well, what you said, Al, was issues of local
Yeah.
importance. And to Mary's point, that they also cross over with national.
I thought she did a great job of giving an example of the domestic violence is a local issue.
As well as a national.
As well as national, but it is a local issue.
Right. And my only point was the way you present that in a policy statement to describe the scope of that, to kind of undercut any pushback on whether an issue is local or national. I see 4 head nods that we're good, so okay, I'll come back.
Sounds good. Work with Chris on
That's
the
fine,
wording.
okay. One thing I did want to mention before. Just a thought. Before we transition, is we have Jessica with us here, Jessica Hines, hiding behind the pillar. And as I went down and rattled off my list of kudos, just want to give Jessica a kudo. You may remember there was an interim period here before the last PIO and the current period. And so for 3 months, Jessica and Jeff were helping steer the ship. So kudos to Jessica and the team. Thanks for all those efforts. Taking all those press
Great job and
calls.
continues to do a great job.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be back here in about half hour.
Okay. Okay, so Steve, we've got Rose is up next. I apologize. Steve.
You're not up yet.
Yeah.
Very swell. I just wanted to get up and stretch.
That's right. We've got Rose
Presidential election.
Noble from Visit
Can
Spokane.
I sit? I'm sorry I was late, I was in the other building.
I would advise
Oh,
against it.
You're okay. Go
Just
sit
sit
down, have a seat.
Just saying.
Right. This is my first of these, so I don't really know how to start. Where would you like me to begin? Do you ask questions? Do I just get into it?
You're doing great so far.
I know.
So we just invite you and then you start with your presentation and then we just go from there.
Okay, it's my understanding that Ron has some slides to coordinate with this, but thank you for seeing us so quickly.
Just a second, we'll see if Ron's here. So
There's
we'll-
several things about the TPA,
TPA, yeah.
like a summary or?
Summary is probably what
Okay.
we'll just have on the screen.
And then a lot of us have it on our computer, if I can get mine pulled up.
I got the one sheeter.
The one sheeter,
Okay.
yeah, this one looks like this, it's
Okay.
white with the little logo. Okay, ready? Okay, so thank you for seeing us today. I am the newly appointed TPA manager, replacing someone that's irreplaceable, Maureen Dodro, who was doing it for many years. So I'm very grateful for Jim Amacio to walk me through the process and for getting us in front of you today for this briefing, so it could be at the next official meeting. The TPA Commission did meet, and what you see on the screen and on your computer screens is a brief summary of what we are pushing forward to the county commissioners. You can see that we have the projected revenue for 2023 with the use of those funds, and then we've also outlined the voted and approved on by the commission projected revenue for 2024 and how we expect to use those funds. I will call out Commissioner Kearns because he was there in the meeting, so he can verify that this is what we spoke on. I was able to get all of the minutes as well as coordinating applications and coordinating presentations to Mr. Macio yesterday, and then today I also shared with him our shared metrics. As the two entities, Sports and Visit, are looking to work on shared reporting, and we'll have a biannual check-in with the commission to make sure that we are spending the money as we are presenting. So the breakdown that we are asking the county to approve are the percentage totals of 63.6% of the TPA collected in 2024 to go to Visit Spokane, and 34.4% of the total collections collected in 2024 to go to Spokane Sports, with a 2% off the top going to reserves. It has been suggested that we could do a dollar amount for that if you'd like, or if it needs to be voted as just the 2%, either way. But this was the best math that we could come up with a little bit of a confusing conversation in the meeting, but we are all in agreement, and this was a motion passed by the commission. Any questions on that?
No, assuming you guys had sounds like a lot of discussion at your meeting, so. This is what everyone came up with.
Yeah, we had a great meeting, and I know that next year we're gonna be providing a little bit more in terms of scope of work too. I've had that conversation. I plan on meeting with Jim after all of this becomes approved to sit down and nail down next year's schedule. We did have like a verbal agreement with the commission to do a 2024 through 2028, agreeing that we wouldn't change the percentages, so that each entity could have long-term planning. As you know, we are looking at groups coming to Spokane all the way into 2030 now. So for us to have that agreement that the percentages will stay the same, it's my understanding we can't legally bind that. We're just doing the one-year contract with the county, but we're in agreement with that. It's more of just the commission to give us a little bit of leniency in how we are planning for the next few years, with annual check-ins to make sure that we are doing what we say we do with the dollars. So just the last thing really quick is they did vote to not extend or not open the application process for special events. And there was dialogue asking the TPA manager, which happens to be myself, to make sure that when events are reaching out, we are directing them to the city that has the Baby LTAC fund that has specifically been gathering money over the past few years through COVID for people to apply for that fund to be used for their events. So the TPA Commission would like to see the TPA dollars stay with the two entities that are doing tourism promotion for the county and the city, and utilize that other special LTAC fund to do those special grant processes. So that's the direction that we're going to be doing for 2024 and 2025. Riveting stuff, but very important.
But it is, I think with the Valley, City of Spokane Valley not being part of it now, it just, it just doesn't change the dynamics as much as just having us understand kind of what is happening with it and stuff. And we've never really messed with any of the, these are really your dollars. We just happen to be the entity that it's coming through. That I think we're truly relying on, the TPA Commission to make those determinations. So don't think that we're gonna come back and change all this stuff, so.
We trust your reps.
Yeah, no,
That's not our purpose.
And I ended the Visit Spokane presentation with just a thank you to the commission and letting them know how important these dollars are. These dollars well surpass our lodging tax that we also do receive, so it's very important to both entities. We're really excited about the long-term agreement, and we have great plans of collaboration with sports moving forward. So it was, I think, a really good, healthy conversation. And yeah, we're happy to have your support.
And so did the percentages change much?
So traditionally they never changed, but the past 2 years sports was coming in with a higher ask, so it kind of was freaking a few people out, and we've come up with the agreement to share the new dollar that the county, thank you, the city approved. We're sharing the percentage of that $1 a little bit differently than the traditional 4. So we're all feeling pretty good about the percentages now. They should not change. You're gonna advocate that they don't change if there ever is conversation brought up again. And then the one thing coming down the pipeline is that the TPA dollars, anything above $2 collected, that does sunset at the state level in January 2027. So we need to start lobbying and advocating that policy is expanded, and that, because that would be a significant blow to both of our budgets to have that cut in half. So we look forward to working with you all at the capacity that we can to help advocate on the state level for those dollars to remain. And then we should all be very proud that it is Spokane that actually started the TPA for the entire state of Washington And Mr. Jim Amacio was there from day one, so we're
Yes,
very
he does.
grateful for his services.
He's been there from day one for
Yes,
a lot.
I was so happy that he received his award this year at the state of the county, so good stuff.
Can I ask, Rose, what did you, and I know we discussed it at the meeting, that the additional $1, how much is that estimated to bring in over a year?
Yeah, forecasted at $1 million.
Okay,
$1 million.
so of that, the
Sports,
sports will get,
60%.
so they'll get 600,000 and then
Yes.
400, okay.
Which is the ask that they had come in asking a couple years ago. They were looking to kind of get their budget up a little bit more. So we were, Ashley Blake, who's the CEO of Visit Spokane Sports, and I were able to have some good conversations to come up with a compromise to where we both get a little bit new revenue next year. They'll get a little bit more than we will, but we're both making out with a positive return.
Okay, I just know that they had presented to us a month ago or so. But so they will have an additional 600,000.
They are receiving additional funding.
Didn't this year.
Correct. And they do have a separate deal with Spokane Valley, just to FYI. And I'm confident that our relationship with the Valley, we're working on that. So you'll see good things, I think, coming in the next couple of years. But sports does have other funding that they go after, as well as Visit.
So, I can't remember, I know we had a lot of conversation about it, but doesn't the Sports Commission also get money from the PFD for promoting the podium?
That's what I don't know. I mean,
They
that's, that was
get,
part
they
of.
get some of the car rental tax that we gave, it's was it 220,000? And then
Well,
we're
we
gonna give them.
requested more,
Yeah,
but
but,
we
and then
haven't.
we're gonna give them the lump sum, right, just for the track, or the cross-country track in the valley, but we
Yeah.
decided against going from 220 to 4.
Both sports,
For that
Spokane
amount.
Sports and Visit Spokane have, I believe, interlocal agreements with the PFD. And we receive, the 1.3 lodging tax is strategic funds that we can request to help buy down the facilities and tourism promotion for specific groups, including sports. I know they received that. New this year, they're receiving an additional surplus of funds at the tune of 81,000 for some financing to host events and security, or referees and security. So they do receive funding from the PFD. We did, out of the 1.3 strategic funds, is what we call it, the LTAC 1.3. I know that Visit Spokane over a 3-year period was just around $900,000, and Sports Spokane was just around, I think, $900,000 as well in request. So we're both receiving funding through the PFD. But it's technically not, I mean, it's lodging tax, it's not PFD's dollars, they're the pass-through through it, we do have to apply it. Just wanna make that clear. And also, I would love to be informed of any opportunity that we can come ask for money too, so.
Yeah, I think that was just, you know, when we had the request, I mean, it wasn't a full picture as to what, how Spokane Sports gets funded. You know, and like, you know, we're not sitting on your board, so so we're not sure, I could say, I'm not sure, you know, how Visit Spokane is getting their funding and what their dollars have been over the years. And so, so that was just when Ashley, right?
Yeah, Ashley,
When she came and presented, it was just kind of like, oh, you have your rental car tax money and we just want the rest of it. You know, it's increased and so we want it. And here at the county, we have other purposes for that too.
Absolutely.
So I mean, so it just wasn't a complete ask, I guess, is what I would say. You know, so we just weren't able to ascertain kind of what are the other funding sources for Spokane Sports and how are they being funded, and with the podium here, it's like that's part of the PFD, so why is, you know, so asking, you know, for our rental car tax to be, you know, increased, you know, I think we kept it the same amount, but we've got new sports facilities too that are coming online that we need to, you know, we don't have a lot of revenue opportunities for because that's one of the few that we have, so we just have to look at all of that.
And just a little bit of knowledge on that too, with sports spending to bid and create events and work events, which is excellent, and we definitely need that in our county. Where Visit does like to come in is, where we do come in, is we provide information and itineraries and promotions both before, during, and after the sporting event for athletes and their families. So in terms of tourism promotion, Josh does sit on our board for the county. I'm always happy to, on the visit side, provide like a breakdown of like our revenue streams and how they come, what we're looking at for future stuff. It's kind of not related to the TPA, but the TPA is a big chunk of dollars we receive. And I'm happy to also coordinate with Ashley on any information that you need for future asks as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, all good?
Okay, I think this ends up on our agenda next week to approve.
I will be there.
So-
Thank you so much for letting us brief today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Steve, you're next up. We're just running a little bit behind. We were way ahead and then we got behind. This is how it happens.
Those proclamations, Pat.
So the first part of this will be executive session because it's our open litigation.
Okay.
So probably do
I'm gonna have you coordinate with our legal here to,
pending and potential litigation.
So
how long do we think it will be?
10 minutes on that part.
So this will be pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1I. Last 10 minutes will require the board, myself, Steve Bartel, and Ashley Campbell.
Okay, so with that, then we're gonna take a 10-minute break on Zoom, because there's nobody on Zoom that needs to, so we can just pause that. And it is 10:52, so let's say we're gonna go into executive session at 10:55, because it'll take about 3 minutes to get everything situated, and so we will be out of executive session at 11:05. And again, it'll just be the commissioners, Steve Bartel, Ashley Cameron, and Chris Anderson.
And no action.
And no action.
So I see you're joining the mayor's
So thank you all for coming back. We did extend by 10 minutes, and then it took us a few minutes to get everything back up and going. So it is now 11:17. We still have all 4 commissioners here, and we will continue our presentation from Steve Bartell.
There we go. So again, there's really 4 parts that I wanted to talk to you about today. We just went over the large loss claims and lawsuits that are protected information under pending and potential litigation. The next section is on large loss claims and lawsuits, all right, and our coverage and where we're going there. The first page there, so you can switch to the next page there. You'll notice there's a list of large loss claims and lawsuits that have been resolved. And the reason I wanted to bring this to your attention is because when we set our reserve, our bookends are really a 1 in 20 year event or a 2 in 20 year event that may occur in a single year. 2023 was one of those 1 in 20 year events. As a matter of fact, it set a record for the most payout that we've ever done in Spokane County. And we'll get into the whys. But you'll see that this is just the list of the bigger resolved claims that we had. There's, 3 jail deaths, some vehicle collisions, Sheriff's Department wrongful death claim, some terminations. I also included the auto physical damage claims to date and how much money we've spent in fixing deputy vehicles, which is right at about $277,000. And I also put on a first party claim from the Gray and Oregon fire. We've identified several trees, as a matter of fact, like over 1,700 trees that are in our right of ways, either as a result of both those fires that are dangerous. We've had an arborist go out and identify all those trees that are dangerous, and we're moving forward with having those taken down. And again, that's to the tune of $635,000. There's currently no money to come in to help pay for that. So we're doing it under a first party claim through risk management. Good thing is we paid a third down, so a little over $200,000 down, and then we'll make another payment. They generally require 50% down to start, and then the rest when the job is completed. But we've worked with these both arborist companies that we're using several times in the past, and we're going to make another payment in January, and then of course when it's completed, it's expected to take probably 2 to 3 months to get all these trees down. So came to a tune in 2023 of about $36.5 million.
Commissioner Jordan.
And is that the risk pool or the county?
That's both. So remember that each one of our claims, we currently have a $500,000 deductible. So we pay back the risk pool $500,000 on all of those claims. The first party, we completely self-insure. So those last 2 on that list are money out of risk management coffers.
Can you get, just for my curiosity, a number of how much of that was covered by the risk pool versus our budget?
Well, so the $500,000 deductible is covered by us, and then the
Yeah. So what happens in these claims,
For each
Commissioner?
one?
Right, is
Okay,
that
all right.
the risk pool makes the payments, and then they invoice us back for a portion of that payment that is within our deductible. And they continue to do that month by month until that deductible is gone, and then they take over any further payment. A good example is on the Thurman case, and that one I wanted to bring to your attention. That was a $22 million loss. We paid our $500,000 deductible. Probably that was dissolved a year and a half ago. We went and we unfortunately got the jury verdict against us for $20 million plus attorney fees that was to be determined, and a tax offset and some other costs, we went to mediation and we ended up settling for $20 million. The risk pool paid the $20 million, but we had to pay above the limit of the $20 million up to the 22. So not only did we already pay our $500,000, but we were on the hook for another $2 million because our coverage limit only went to 20 million. And the total, that's total incurred, meaning, we spent about $1.5 million defending the case. And so that on top of the 20 million is where I came back to the member county that would have to pay the additional. That hurt real bad in 2023. It's the first time we've ever exceeded, or any county has exceeded, our policy limit. That was what we classify in the insurance business as a nuclear verdict. On the next slide, again, just to review that with our current program, we have $20 million per occurrence or per claim, and we have a $500,000 deductible. And this is our new structure going into 2024. We've had to get very, very constructive with dealing with the commercial insurance companies for reinsurance and excess insurance, because half of the players, half of the commercial markets for public entities no longer write public entity business. It's just gotten too expensive for them, and their losses are much higher than what they're receiving in premium. So now there's about 5 bigger commercial public entity companies that still write that kind of business, but it's gotten very expensive to the point that you'll notice on the bottom there that the risk pool actually carries a $3 million self-incurred retention, meaning the members jointly will cover all of the cost and expense up to that $3 million part before it goes to reinsurance and excess.
And I know talking to other counties, I mean, we're not the only one, but like, I just was hearing Lincoln County, they're in the smaller risk pool. There's a couple of different risk pools for counties. I don't think they're in ours, right?
No, they're not. No.
They're in another
Right.
one.
The rural counties risk pool has several of the smaller counties that don't have quite the exposure. When the risk pool first, the Washington County's risk pool first
But their
formed,
fees have just doubled from like, 400,000 to another, adding another 400,000 to.
Exactly.
Which is just, for the small counties is
Exactly.
hard to absorb.
And I have to commend the commissioners that, we have funded the liability program so that, we can survive over the years. We took a pretty good hit this last year, and we're gonna see that when the actuary study comes around for future rates. We're, expecting pretty substantial increases, but there's several counties that have taken big hits to where they had to go out and tax their citizens to try to get some money back in their reserves. That's the only way they can get it if they're not smart enough to recognize that they're gonna pay for some losses and put some away for that year that's terrible like we had last year, then they find themselves in big trouble. So again, I commend the commissioners for understanding the dynamics of that and making sure that we're funded adequately. Next page, please. So these are some of the dynamics in the commercial liability program. It certainly, as you well know, it's not like going out and finding a different auto insurance policy, and just weighing Progressive versus Allstate or something else. It's we are still fighting, and again, some of these commercial insurance markets back east are really pointing at Washington becoming an extension of California as far as the legislation and actions against law enforcement. And we still have our joint and several liability. There are still no caps whatsoever. So whatever a jury decides they want to award a litigant, it's just not overturned. As a matter of fact, you remember the Hill case where our contractor for medical services at the jail ended up with a $26 million verdict against them for punitive damages. And they appealed that. The court said, no, too bad, that stands. So the courts aren't too favorable on taking a jury decision and overturning it, even though to us it's a shocking number. Again, makeup of juries has changed over the years. We used to think that we had a little bit of reprieve here on the eastern side of the state in the courts, that it was a little bit more conservative, so the jury awards weren't nearly as high, and that dynamic has completely changed. And we've seen that in mock trials, we've seen that in real trials. The amount of money that is being awarded is just huge. These are called social inflation because it's happening across the country, and we're seeing more and more nuclear verdicts, not just 20 million, but 100 million or $1 billion. I mean, the case against Walmart, I think, was $1.7 billion was an award for somebody who was injured in one of their stores. We also have this new, very fearful epidemic going on, and it's called unregulated third-party funding. It's almost like an investment strategy where companies will invest in a plaintiff's firm with the thought that they will fund the plaintiff's attorney the costs of litigation for hopes that they could get a 10 or a 15% stake in any award that occurs, which, as you can imagine, makes it extremely difficult for us to go to mediation and try to resolve a case for a reasonable amount of money. Because, before this dynamic occurred, a plaintiff's attorney a lot of times would take a case on a contingency, meaning if they don't get anything, they don't get paid anything. So, a settlement was more attractive in that there was some guaranteed money coming in for the plaintiff and the plaintiff's counsel, and they got their costs and attorney fees. And there is no regulation on that. Apparently, it's not illegal, but we're seeing a lot more of that. Obviously, inflation has a role in this. Underwriting profits have been out the window for most of these big insurance companies, because all it takes is one bad case and one big jury award and their profit completely goes away. And again, it's not Spokane County alone. We're seeing this across all of our 25 member counties. And it's, we're doing everything we can to try to increase our loss control efforts and our training efforts and pre-defense review programs and a lot of different programs. But, we do operations and services, so it's going to happen. Next page, please. If you remember, several years ago, probably been about 6 years now, I did go out and that was the third time I've gone out to the commercial market just to ensure that we were getting the best bang for the buck, being members of the risk pool and the cost of insurance. I had thoughts of possibly doing that again in 2024, but with the loss history that you just saw, it would be a waste of time because, again, those companies will give you a quote. The last time we went out, they were going to require a $2 million SIR in all claims, and the limit that they would provide as far as liability coverage was only $10 million. And there was a lot of exclusions of current coverage that we have through the risk pool. Next page, please. I do intend in 2024, when we do our actuary, to also have PricewaterhouseCoopers update the capital modeling study so that we have a really good handle on where our reserves are at and where they need to be, and we can then talk about whether we need a plan to get some more money into the fund or how we're going to do that or not do that to make sure that we have adequate reserves for a future 1-in-20-year event. And that's about a $15,000 cost. I did budget for that in 2024 because that's real important that we know why we have the money, where we have it, And it's based on our history and what we have currently opened and what that expectation is. And again, I love the actuaries because their one statement that they say every year is when they do the actuary, it's guaranteed to be wrong, right? It's all estimates, so. I did, next slide, please. I did put a dynamic of the 2019 capital modeling study and where our funding was in our 507 liability fund. And as you can see, we're tracking just fine with adequate reserves. I still believe we have adequate reserves, even though it's been reduced by about $4 million over this last year. But it'll be interesting to see where that comes up with our current costs. As you know, the liability cost for the risk pool for that coverage has gone up dramatically as well. Next slide, please. I did talk to the risk pool about the potential of raising our deductible. Obviously, the more the bigger slice of the pie that you have in the equation, the more risk you take, but also the more potential to save money on the other end as far as premiums go. As you can see, the reduction in cost for going to those bigger deductibles, they don't make a whole lot of sense, because that's basically one or two claims that go into the next layer that we would have to incur the cost for. Just doesn't make sense with the amount of reserves that we would have to build up, which is a lot higher, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, this current policy year, our liability coverage was $5.1 million. Just crazy. So I wouldn't recommend that. And the last slide, please, just kind of sums up the whole presentation. So I certainly can answer any questions, but I suspect that once we get our actuary study done, end of February, beginning of March, and that capital model study, I'll come back with those numbers and different options for funding and get some direction on where we want to go.
I assume you have that framed on your wall.
That's one of my go-tos.
Next year, okay.
That's a safety manager.
That one and the fellow that's bent over, it looks like his head is.
No, it's, like I said, I mean, this is happening across the state and nationally. It's gonna bankrupt counties.
Been a very stressful year. I tell people I'm only 39 years old. It's a huge job just killing you.
It speaks to why Steve has been incredibly protective of that fund. And it speaks to why we have continual actuaries. So I know as we look at our budgets and what we're doing in the future, this is one fund that I would just continue to caution that we're careful with what we do with it or don't do with it, because you never know when a Thurman's gonna come through and it surpasses our 20 million. So I give huge kudos to Steve for managing it as closely as he does, but it really does speak to this is one of those funds I would recommend we're incredibly careful and strategic with.
I think we have over the years, so we've all done.
Yeah, I will be honest. I was a little nervous when I saw Randy's email about the interest from those type of funds like the liability fund, because that's a pretty good chunk of change that stays in the fund and keeps the cost allocations somewhat reasonable. If that were to be removed for, that's y'all's decision, it would just result in, an increase to try to recapture that money back.
I appreciate that, because we were asking, what funds were, we were making, there was more questions on some of that, so it's like I didn't want it to be just blanket and trying to talk through, so we'll continue to work through that. Okay, well, thank you for that uplifting report.
Doom, despair, agony. Now we'll all reconvene at the bar.
Exactly. First round's on me.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep, bye.
Heather.
Morning.
Good morning.
We have received the grant from Department of Commerce to stabilize the newly arriving refugees. The funding for program cost is broken up into 2 cycles. So one will expire on June 30th, 2024. And then the second cycle will go July 1, 24 through June 25. For the first year, we have a total of $415,000. 15% of that can be our admin cost, 85% to our programming. So programming would be about $352,700. We would retain 10% for the county's administrative costs, and then 5% to pass on. We have to do an RFP this time because we're not under the emergency order like we were when we did this program the first 2 times. So if I start the RFP next week, the goal would be to have the new contract start around January 15th. And then that would give the subrecipient or subrecipients from January 15th to June to spend that first obligation of funds. The funding can be spent towards rent and housing needs, transportation, clothing, employment, burial, removal, or anything essential that we determine helps to stabilize them. It's pretty open to what we feel is necessary. They also have left it pretty open to the county can determine on its own if they want to set a priority population of refugees that they want to serve, or do they just want to serve any refugee regardless of where they're coming from based on whoever's the highest need. So that's a determination I would need from you guys. How do you want that RFP written? Do you want to serve the original RFP from Commerce calls out the Ukraine and the Afghanistan refugees specifically in the title, but in all of their question and answers back and forth, they also talk about asylum seekers, parolees, anybody with any kind of refugee status, and then those from Mongolia. Thoughts?
I mean, my thought is that we should follow what the Commerce is saying, on it. So if it says specifically, if it's calling out Afghan and Ukrainian, we should follow that, but that's my thought.
Well, but that's the change. The original grant was Ukraine and Afghan. Now they're saying you can open it up to everybody. And I'm not in favor of that. I mean, it was very targeted for those that were, in a war situation, and Ukraine and Afghanistan, I'd be in favor of just limiting it to that. Otherwise, we become, a repository for refugees from, that's an open border strategy that I can't support.
Like I said, as long as if the grant award specifically states it, I mean, that's.
It says that the county can determine and set its own priority of who they want to serve. So it is up to the board. We can either determine a priority population that we are going to serve, or we can leave it open. But that is the county's determination based on how we want to serve or who we want to serve.
And what are our statistics? I mean, are we still receiving more Ukrainian refugees?
I have not been able to get any statistics on who we're receiving more from.
Shift.
Yeah, I mean, it just that during COVID, that was the purpose was for the Ukrainian refugees.
With the Thrive
Yes.
building and all of that.
Everything, that was that was the whole initiative, was Thrive and Ukraine's, and, you know, they're a war-torn country, they were leaving. I mean, that was a humanitarian effort. I mean, that was easy to support.
I mean, my thoughts, because we have an organization like Thrive that is operational, that is working, these are not massive amounts of dollars. I mean, it's a lot of money, but this is not a massive amount of money to stand up something new. I mean, I would think we would want to put those dollars towards something that's kind of already working, like the Thrive. I know it's got to go through an RFP type process, but I mean, I would want to see I would think the way to get the most bang for those dollars would be to put it towards something like the previous dollars which were targeted towards the Ukrainian population, because the infrastructure is already there, and these can help them. These dollars would be able to help them sort of step it up even more.
I first of all wanted to thank Heather for your work applying for this. Appreciate that very much. I know it was kind of a scramble to get it done, so thanks for your work. I want to let the board know, I heard from Refugee Connections about this. They told me, and I heard about it from them this morning, they said that they have been in coordination with Thrive, with Manzanita House, International Rescue Committee, and World Relief when they were trying to encourage us to apply for this. And those discussions, according to Refugee Connections, reflected a hope from those groups that some of these funds could be used for gap filling needs, potentially rental assistance, childcare, housing assistance, other things like that. And she told me that their conversations had not reflected kind of restricting to just Ukrainian. We've got Afghan refugees as well. And apparently there's a meeting next week of all those groups, plus they're going to invite the Slavic Association to see if they can get all on board with one coordinated strategy. So my request would be, let's not overly restrict it just to one single population. I think we want to hear from the experts through that process what they see as the greatest need for both of those groups. So that was, and that included Thrive. That's what I was told in that kind of take on it. So.
And is there a reason why Thrive couldn't apply to then disperse out to some of the other organizations?
And Refugee Connections told me they hadn't made a final decision, but they did not think that they would be applying. They wanted to go to whoever the best organization is to administer the gap filling that they all think is needed. But they requested that we don't just restrict it to a single population, because that would limit the ability to fill those gaps for Afghan refugees, for example.
Okay, but I guess, so I'm trying to figure out if, because when we got the funds before, it was specifically
Right.
targeted. These funds, if the initial Commerce statement was that it was for Afghan and Ukrainian. And then
Yeah,
they
it says
kind
all
of backpedaled on that.
stabilizing refugees, including
So
those arriving from Ukraine and Afghanistan. That's the title, and then everywhere else, they just expanded that their definition included all these other populations, is how they left it.
I mean, so we could,
I would just ask that let's let the experts tell us what the right population to serve is. If we restrict it at the RFP phase, then we're funneling it, right? But if we keep it somewhat open, we're still going to get a proposal, and we can decide at that time whether taking between different options potentially. So we still have the ability to pick a focus to it, I think, once we hear from those groups what the needs are.
just trying to figure out, or delay putting the RFP out if you think they're supposed to be getting together.
Yeah, potentially.
And then decide, and then we can still make the decision if we want to. I mean, because partly what I don't want to do is have had all this money come in to Thrive to help the Ukrainian refugees, and then be like, oh, we're not going to fund you now, you know, which is what I think the purpose, you know, if, even though other people may not like that. I don't know. I
The
think,
title was Ukrainian and Afghan population, and then it was the supporting Q&A that came from the state that was like, oh no, it's open to everybody. Essentially, ignore the title, this can go to anybody.
Yeah.
So when Scott had called around and said, hey, there's a desire, you know, do you support putting this on? I was told that this was to support the Ukrainian populations, that's how it was presented to me when we moved this forward, because I don't think the Q&A had been released by the state yet. None of us knew. None of us knew this was open to anybody, so.
I thought it was
To anybody and
Afghan
everybody.
right, because that was what the title was, so.
right, it was both, but it was, you know, so I mean, that's where that's, the RFP should, in my mind, reflect what dollars have come down, but I'm happy to delay the RFP a week to see what the thoughts are from this group, but it's kind of like what they did with the right-of-way funding for homeless. It's, you know, Commerce did, that it's still going to those same groups for right-of-way funding. Because you can't just pay a lot of money and then just cut it off. And so that's kind of what I'm feeling Commerce was trying to do with these funds, was to continue to help that project. So I'm again happy to wait a week and see what people say.
That'd be fine with me.
Before it goes out to RFP, it's just, you know, so it may delay until January 1. Because I don't know how.
See if we can get some feedback from them maybe by the middle of this month, so that
you can get it.
Maybe by the week of Christmas, we can put out the RFP.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, but I'm still leaning that it's probably, I'm leaning that it would still match the title of the Commerce dollars. But happy to take further comment from people, but I just worry, you know, again, especially when Commerce is doing funds like that, they put it out, somebody gets the money to get their program up and going, and then they don't have any funding to continue it. And so I just want to make sure that it seems like that's part of what this is supposed to be doing. Similar to just the right-of-way funding that the state did for Camp Hope.
I will reach out to those agencies that we were in contact with that helped assist in compiling the application documents and see what information I can gather from them, and then I will share it with the board.
Yeah, because I think we all got calls from Thrive, you know, trying to make sure we got it. So.
They didn't tell me what day next week they're meeting, they just said next week, so I can get that for you if it helps.
Yeah.
Well, and the organization that was pushing to even file the grant request was Thrive from my standpoint, and, you know, the Ukrainian effort and stuff, and so I just thought it was a continuation of, you know, our support for that effort. So anyway.
And that's when you left. I said, to me, it seems similar to what Commerce is doing with the right-of-way funding and trying to continue those groups that they've helped fund, you know, through, you know, like the Catalyst Project, through Catholic Charities, that they're still funding that for a period of time. So I see this as just kind of that. Otherwise, you deplete that funding, and then that organization that was stood up doesn't have as much chance.
So I will get that information and get that back to you, and then we'll plan on putting the RFP out about a week and then push everything out. Okay. So that hopefully we can still have a contract with whatever subrecipient in January, so they have as much time as possible to spend that first allocation of funds, since they're gonna be under a little bit of a push for that first year. Yeah. Any questions? All right, thank you so much.
Okay, that takes us back to Pat.
Madam Chair, on this topic, do we want to wait until we have all five? Maybe this afternoon, we could do it right after our
Because you're gonna talk about press conferences.
Press releases, press conferences, media
Okay.
outreach.
It might be beneficial to have us all for it.
Okay, so then, anything else this morning?
I do have one miscellaneous, and then I'm aware of, I think, 1 or 2 exec sessions. Mike, do you wanna wait till this afternoon?
I can do, mine's quick.
Yeah.
But when we have
I
all
think we
the
only have
commissioners-
3 here this morning. Board
Did
members.
Al and Amber know what it is?
Do you wanna wait
Yeah,
till this
yeah.
afternoon to do it? Okay.
So I don't think we have, this afternoon, we don't have any public hearings, right?
I don't believe so, no.
Anything that's gonna be separate?
No, not that I know of.
Sure, Chris?
Can't speak for the other two.
Any prepared remarks?
I've done enough of that lately, I'm good.
Just checking to see how long the meeting's gonna go. So then, yeah, it should be a pretty quick agenda meeting if we're not taking anything separate and it's a consent agenda. So the miscellaneous is fine, and then,
Yeah.
so then we'll have Pat this afternoon. Do I have to say we're continuing the meeting, or just it's miscellaneous?
I would probably just add it as a miscellaneous the afternoon.
Okay, and then we'll have executive sessions this afternoon. Okay. And anything else? So you have a miscellaneous for
I
right
have
now?
one, yeah, quick, I think we can probably do, even in the absence of the other 2 commissioners. This is just the, we are reinstating the interlocal agreement between the county and Shrek for the management of the county assets that are more or less under Shrek's care. This is basically the communication towers. We had an agreement that was in place in 2020. Whatever reason, it was drafted to last 1 year with no extensions, and so now we have none. So
Although
in
we've
the,
been
in,
operating under that agreement.
yeah, we've been operating, I think everybody's been acting like it exists, so.
Just need to formalize it again.
Exactly, so we're basically reestablishing it. We did, in talking with Brian Wurst, who is Shrek's attorney, we're at this point, what we're contemplating as far as the term and duration, we're contemplating an evergreen duration, so non-expiring, with a provision that it can be terminated by either party with 90 days notice for any reason. So we will not run into the expiration issue. It will basically last as long as the parties don't terminate it.
Is there something that is, just make sure that we're feeling comfortable that they're meeting their obligation? Because this is to ask,
Sure.
so it keeps us as the owner of the towers.
Yes.
But we're asking them to maintain and operate those towers.
Yes.
That it just seems like if we don't sunset it, then.
And that was the one issue that we had discussed on whether we needed something in it. Brian's concern, obviously, so we had started it off with I guess a relatively long period. The concern there was that, well, if we have this, I think it had initially been a 5-year term with a couple of 5-year automatic extensions, unless it's terminated prior to that. I guess the concern there being you have a 15-year agreement, a lot can change in 15 years, and again, you may run into the same circumstance where it gets kind of forgotten and expires and nobody catches it.
Right.
So that's kind of trying to find that balance. So I guess given that, that concern, what kind of timeline?
I don't know, I mean, it's just making sure that, because if you do an agreement that doesn't sunset like that, then it almost becomes somebody down the future is like, oh, well, we own them, kind of thing, we've been the ones doing all this. And again, if something were to happen, just liability wise, then who's on the hook for that?
Well, from the
truly are.
From the liability perspective, I think, we would want this to be in place and remain in place because it does have the liability provisions in it. So if for some reason, things just kind of run along as.
But we want to ensure that they are maintaining them properly. I mean, it's kind of like, how they do have to present their budget just since we're turning over the one-tenth money. I don't know, I just, you know, we're the fiduciaries of it,
Yes.
so that's what I just don't wanna go forever. I don't wanna be another Martin Hall. I don't know, you know how
Yeah.
you just do these
Well-
agreements that sound like a good idea, and then, 10 years later, it's like, technology's changed.
Yeah, the playing field is
All of this
different.
is, yeah.
And I will say the one reason that I would even contemplate bringing an evergreen to the board like this is because there is no financial aspect to this agreement. This is quite simply a management operation of the towers. And initially, there were some additional assets that were included because this was originally drafted much closer in time to Shrek, the formation of Shrek. But since that time, those assets have been kind of sorted out. And the ones that were supposed to, Shrek has control of the assets that were supposed to go to them. So really, at this point, this is limited to
Like
the
all the
towers.
radios and all of that.
Exactly. So
taken
we don't
care
really
of.
have any other assets that would be operated under this, but for the towers. And so we've narrowed in scope. There is no financial aspect to this particular ILA. It is just basically permits Shrek to operate the towers, manage the towers, does not transfer any ownership, and deals with liability.
So the people that were renting or leasing land from, that's an agreement between the
That is between.
landholder and the county?
Correct, and that is the other aspect of this, that originally in here, this had Shrek managing the leases, and we did modify that as well. I pulled that back in, so Shrek's role in the renewal or management of the leases is to assist the county in any renewal or any additional leases that would be needed in the future for the county assets. And so they are now, it is very clear in the agreement, these assets are county assets, and Shrek, via their role as emergency communications, simply utilizes them and manages them for that purpose. And so I guess if from a legal standpoint, if issues come up with the towers, it's not going to be tied to this agreement. It's likely going to be tied to other aspects. It's going to be tied to potentially the land lease or potentially other parties' involvement with the towers.
Well, and it's just, all this came out because, Broadlink was trying to get something on a tower down in South County, and then we were realizing that all of this hadn't been done,
Yes,
and all of that.
lots of
So, I mean, I just,
stones that had not been
Yeah.
overturned for some time.
and I just want to make sure that we're all working together, because I mean, we're truly all doing this for the public purpose, and first and foremost is public safety, which I totally get and understand, but then, broadband can use those towers because they're on a different frequency and those kinds of things to do stuff. So, and since it's the county's asset, that's why I just want to make sure that we continue to work well together.
Yes.
Because some, as we know, people can not always work well together, and I just want to ensure that it sets us up for success, that we're really looking out for what's best for our communities.
Certainly.
But I don't know how to put that in the agreement. Like, nobody gets a fight about this.
Right. I will say, amongst the provisions, Shrek is required to maintain all county assets in good or better condition as they stand at present time. Aspects like that.
Is this on next week's agenda?
Yes, that would be the intent. Shrek is then meeting, I believe, on the 21st of December, and that's when they would execute this as well. And that way we'd get this back in place and just
as quickly as possible.
Exactly. That would be the intent. I could certainly pass that along, and maybe they could kind of incorporate an update in kind of their year when they come for the budget and say, just mention the assets, mention the towers, and say, whether there've been any changes, whether there've been any issues.
Because
that-
I mean,
that
I'd
type
be
of thing.
curious, yeah, even I think it's good for us as commissioners just to be aware of if there's any additional things that are happening on the towers. And I guess
Sure.
hopefully we're not allowing them to franchise out.
Oh, no, this would not, this has very specific terms as far as what they're, I mean, they are providing management, dispatch, administrative support, you know, and they are managing all of this for their purpose as, you know, emergency communications. So certainly they don't have an independent right to utilize the towers for other purposes. Additionally, those types of issues are addressed, at least certainly for the Co-Road Tower, which is the one we've been looking at recently. Those are addressed in the other underlying land lease as well, as far as what can and cannot occur on the towers without additional agreements being memorialized.
Trust that you're gonna, you know.
We're watching this one closely.
I just, as I know, different entities, you know, I mean, Broadlink could, depending on who runs it in the future, I mean, could be the same way, but I just wanna make sure everybody's working together in the best interest.
Yes.
So. Try, like, the only time you can put it in a contract, you know, is when it's in a contract.
That is absolutely
So
correct.
that, I mean, maybe that's all we need to do, is just add a sentence that it is the property of the county, and we want to ensure that in the future that, you know, all entities who, you know, are working in the best interest of our citizens for it. I don't know, there's a, we can think about that, but that'd be the only thing I just wanna make sure.
Sure. Absolutely. We'll get that ready, and yeah, that will be on next week for approval.
I know, we've got the legislative meeting coming up, so maybe we'll just talk about that this afternoon too, under miscellaneous, just to make sure that, you know, how we wanna run the meeting. I'll just say quickly that I just plan to let, you know, I think last year we kind of let Mike Bird just kind of run it, him, Jeff, and I'm happy to just start the meeting and let them run with it, because we'll be pretty limited. I know, talking to a couple of legislators, it's a pretty tight, it's a busy time for them right now, so.
I think, if I remember correctly, I think we were essentially just there, if the legislators had follow-up or specific questions about, now why exactly is the county asking for that, we were there to then give sort of additional context, but yeah, Mike kind of led the discussion, and hey, this is the first ask, this is the second, here's one you've seen before, still on the agenda, kind of thing like that.
So if you guys are okay with that, we'll just let Mike kind of,
It worked.
and we don't have to talk about it this afternoon. We can all interject
I'm all good.
when we want to. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Okay, I think then we are done for today, this morning, anyway, 12:05.